to Beats Learning. I'm your host, Ben Davenport. I'm really excited about today's episode, as not only is our guest an absolute powerhouse in the electronic music scene, but he's also a very good friend of mine and someone I highly respect. Today's guest has been making absolute bangers for the last 2 decades, all whilst also running his own record label and an incredibly successful mixing and mastering business, working with some of the biggest names in the scene. I've no doubt there's a lot to learn for us all today. However, before we get into it, if you like the content you are listening to, we would really appreciate your support. So go ahead and like this video and subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with everything going on here at Beats Learning HQ. Anyway, now that's done, let me introduce Andy MacDougall. So, Andy MacDougall, thank you very much for coming on to Beats Learning. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Ben. I've been looking forward to this for ages.
Mate, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the intro to everyone that's listening out there that obviously we've been friends for a very, very long time.
We have indeed, yeah.
So it's been an absolute pleasure getting you on today. It really has.
And this is a long overdue catch-up
yeah,
as well, isn't it? We've got a lot to talk about.
To the pub afterwards, I think.
Yeah.
But look, there's a number of reasons why you're on the show today. Look, you've had an incredible career, right? You know, you're pretty much a one-stop shop when it comes to electronic dance music. You know, you're a producer and DJ under Trilucid, which we'll talk about in a bit. You've obviously got your own label in Ionica Audio. You've got your own mixing and mastering studio under amp.audio. You know, there's a huge amount of love clearly for electronic music. Where does this passion come from?
It's funny, like I got asked that question recently, and it goes back to 1991 when my mate's big brother, Simon Jordan, shout out, gave me the Ultimate Rave double cassette. And I played it non-stop, and it had like Prodigy and Opus 3 and all of these like amazing rave tracks.
Amazing.
And I just was like, I was hooked like immediately, as you can imagine. And then what happened after that is I had my dad was really into computers, and he had this really decent computer, and I got this bit of software on a floppy disk on a free magazine, and it was called Fast Tracker. And it was music production software. And this was like when I was 11. Plugged it in. It had some ready-made samples from like Prodigy tracks, and then it's just a little sequencer with like 4 tracks, and you drop the sounds in, and then
Amazing.
And it's this like vertical scrolling thing. And I was absolutely hooked. And honestly, that was, those 2 things were the kind of gestation of everything that came after that. And yeah, like, you know, as with all of these things, like you kind of start with a certain intention of like, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then the thing that you wanted to do, there's no money in it, or like it's really difficult, or like,
to the music scene.
yeah, exactly. Or everyone hates what you do, and like, so then you find other little avenues, and which is why I've, like, you know, you sort of mentioned that the various different aspects of my music kind of career and business, and it's really just a matter of finding something that's a bit of a niche that some people want, but it's not enough to sustain a full business, or not yet. And then it gives you sort of opportunity to explore other avenues with it and that sort of thing. So that's why I've got so many things going on.
So what come first then? What was the driving force for you to like setting up your career? Where did that actually start?
I really, at uni, I was studying environmental science, so completely unrelated.
A little bit different.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it, but I found all my spare time I was like making music, and then I made a few tunes, and I got them sent off to Bonsai Records.
Amazing.
So this is like 2002, 2003, something like that. And yeah, they kind of like they were into a couple of the tracks, and this was at the time where that label was releasing like Push and, you know, Mike tunes and stuff like that. It was like massive, like brilliant label. But nothing came of it there and then. But then a couple of years later, like, I'd kind of built a good relationship with them, and they were just like, and they signed a few bits, and that was really where the kind of production stuff started. You know, as a way of seeing it, like, as a career. Because, like, there was a couple of things that happened. Like, I did around about 2007, I signed a track to Infrasonic, which was like a trance label at the time. It's kind of like it's dropped off a little now, but at the time it was kind of like, you know, a heavy hitter. And they released a track, and then the track got on like a Ministry of Sound compilation and a Gatecrasher compilation.
You're not talking about Departures, are you?
I'm talking about Departures.
I remember when we first met and you mentioned to me, obviously, your alias, Trilucid, and I was like, hang on a minute, I recognise that name. And I remember going to Gatecrasher, back onto an old CD. Everyone who loves that music had that CD, right? And then seeing it, Trilucid, Paul Van Dyke, Departures. What a phenomenal thing to do.
I mean, like that. It was really like a kind of, oh wow, okay, I can do this. And the money from that was great, because this is when those two brands were massive, Ministry and Gatecrasher, both massive. Yeah. On both compilations, the same track. And I think I got like £7,000 off the Gatecrasher one.
Wow.
Which at the time, you're like,
that's a lot of money.
Wow, that's decent money. And you're like, cool, I'll get like a few tracks each year on Ministry compilations and Gatecrasher compilations. Never happened again, did it?
You say that though, you've released on some great labels, like Anjuna, for example. Like, what a cool thing there. You know, how does it feel to sort of, obviously, let's look at Departures as an exact scenario, right? How does it feel, that moment for, you know, you put your hard work into making this track, and then suddenly actually you see some sort of recognition, which obviously in this industry these days is incredibly hard to come by, right? How did that feel?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely amazing when it happens. And so much of like a music career is like you graft and graft and graft, and you write tunes, and sometimes a tune comes together in a day, and sometimes it doesn't ever come together. Like 7 years, like Cheyenne, which we released recently, it took 7 years to make, right, from start to finish. And you put the tunes out, and then labels like, yeah, it's rubbish, don't like it. And you're like, okay. And
7 years labour and love, and then
like, not for us. Yeah, but like, it doesn't really go anywhere. I'm like, oh my god, that was genuinely feedback on Cheyenne.
Oh wow.
It was like, yeah, it doesn't really kind of have a payoff. I was like, I've been trying to figure that out for 7 years. Anyway, like you do all of these things, and you work, and you get really attached to the tracks, and then you send them out, and like it's a lot of rejection, and then you get successes, but the success is like a day, and then the rejections and the graft is like weeks and months, and it's just like, so you have to really, well, I definitely really had to kind of sort of take those wins and go, right, okay.
We've got to have thick skin as well, right? To keep, to have the motivation to keep submitting and keep pushing forward when, exactly as you say, you get a lot of rejections. But what did you take from that? Obviously, you've mentioned the ability to sort of kind of take advantage of the wins and make note of that, but let's say you did get a rejection, you know, what lesson did you learn from that? If it was, say, something towards specifically you did on the track, or just the way you submitted, or whatever it might be, were there lessons learned from that as well? Yeah,
definitely. I like if the like a lot of labels, when they reject a track, they will give a little bit of feedback, you know, like, and more often than not it was you know, like something production related. Like one track I submitted to a label, and they were just scathing about it. But they said, like, because I'd used a lot of like risers and crashes and stuff, and they're just like, it just sounds so dated. and they rejected it. And I was like, wow.
Ouch.
But I really took it on board.
Yeah.
And now, like, for my tracks, I try to not use any of those kind of quick fix go-to effects, and instead work on transitions in a more sort of musical and fluid way, without just like, there's a big crash and like there's a massive snare roll. So yeah, you do actually get like genuinely good critical feedback sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of like the kind of feeling of just getting rejected all the time, sometimes it really did hurt, you know, and it's like, you know, it kind of gets to you. But then at the same time, you do get a thick skin, and then you kind of and it takes a while, but you start to have a lot of belief in like the music you're making. Yeah. And that's, you know, you become more confident when you're producing, and become more confident like about how you mix your tracks, and you know, like this is melodically good, and this has got a good hook. And it's not right for that label, it's not right for that A&R, but it's so subjective.
Yeah, of course, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
So you know, you because it's so subjective, you might have caught that person on a bad day. Maybe they had a massive night out on the Saturday, and it's Wednesday now, and they're really sad, and they listen to the tune, and it's just like, oh, I don't like this. But if you caught them on another day, maybe it would have been a different response, you know. And like, it really is kind of like, I think that arbitrary in a lot of ways. And, you know, you write tunes, and particularly, like, I suppose more recently been writing music that is kind of like trying to not sound like other stuff. Okay. So like trying to sound like us and trying to sound sort of unique
and original is very
but if you send that to but then you send that to labels and like, you know, like, what is this? Like, we're a progressive house label and this can't really be pigeonholed, so we can't sign it, you know, that kind of thing. And you know, like a lot of labels, their brand and their kind of sound is really like, it's so tied to the sort of aesthetic of the sound, you know, like, and there might be certain tracks they sign from artists who are regular artists that they don't even sign like other stuff because like it doesn't fit the sound of the label, even though you're a label like stalwart, you know. So yeah, it's really it kind of adds an extra layer of kind of complexity to it, you know. It's like, well, I'm trying to make interesting and exciting and new and original music, but then no, like it's people, it's really hard to find an audience for it.
Yeah, of course.
So like that was definitely an experience on that was really like on See Through You, which is a track I've just released on Ionica. I was like, I feel like it's a really good track, a really, really strong track, hooky, the production I'm happy with, like it sounds quite unique, and I really felt like this one, I'll put it out and it's going to connect and it's going to find that like, you know, that momentum. And it hasn't as of yet. But it has, there is like the little kind of signs that I was right. But the actual, like, so like, we did an interview that was like based off the back of that track. And yeah, we did a music video for it, which Hilton made. And it's on MTV. Like it was an MTV video chart. You know, so like those things hit, but then when it comes to the streaming numbers and the chart positions on Beatport and stuff like that, just didn't hit.
It's crazy, isn't it? Really, like obviously not to sort of kind of come away from the whole point of Beats Learning, which is music, right? But even I see it myself trying to do social media and things. You know, things that. Just to try and get a viral video or something that you think is going to be a good hit, and then suddenly you get absolutely no traction. And once again, it could be based on the time of day that you posted or released, or the marketing has gone behind it, or lack of, or whatever it might be. And sometimes you know you can have an absolute banger and just simply not, the world can't hear it. You know, what do you do in a situation like that? So, for example, let's look at what was it called? Sorry,
See Through You.
See Through You. Sorry. You know, what are you doing to try and build up the audience on that, or to try and sort of promote it?
Yeah. So one of the, it's a good question. So one of the things that signing to other labels, one of the kind of drawbacks is they release music every week, or at least like sometimes a couple of times a week, at least a couple of times a month. And for them, the kind of time to focus on the track is the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then once the track's out, if it does well, then they might start putting a bit more into it and advertise a bit more, you know, things like that. But if it doesn't have the momentum straight away, then they just move on to the next track.
It falls through the gaps.
Yeah. And so there's so many like absolutely fantastic tracks.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, they've got 10,000 streams and they never get anywhere really on Beatport, and you know, they kind of have a little flash of recognition and then disappear.
Yeah.
And like, you know, we kind of dig through tracks for playing in mixes and stuff.
Absolutely.
And you find these tracks that have got like, you know, a couple of thousand streams, and you're just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
How has nobody heard? How is this not like one of the biggest prog tracks ever, you know?
Yeah. At the same time, for a DJ, that's an absolute goal. Like,
absolutely.
Win, right?
Yeah. It is. It's a really good feeling when you find a track like that and you're just like, oh man, nobody knows about this. We can play this one out. But yeah, so that's definitely a drawback of like signing to other labels. Whereas with your own label, basically, I've like, you put the track out, do promo, you know, like a couple of weeks before, but then I've been doing remixes of the tracks, like as in I'm doing a remix of my own track, and then putting that out and re-promoing like a few, like the original
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
And then doing things like playlist pitching, but like week 1 and then week 8, and then even like longer. So that, like, quite often I will pitch to playlists 6 months after the release. Sometimes they come back and say we were looking for a like we're looking for new music, and then sometimes they're like, oh yeah, this one passed us by, and it's great. So let's go. It's about sort of giving those tracks a bit more of a chance to get the visibility, because once they get the traction, once they start getting the good streaming numbers on Spotify, they have a momentum all of their own, you know. And so like that's been a huge part of like sort of running the label is having that ethos where it's like, and we don't release lots of music, right? So, you know, some labels will be like, oh, we want a 4-track EP. It's like, but that's almost half a year's worth of music for us, right? So we will like release something and then give it a month before release the next thing. But it takes us a long time to write tracks, like say, up to 7 years. So we don't just want to like put, you know, 7 years worth of work plus whatever else all onto an EP and then it just be missed.
Of course.
So like that's why, you know, going onto our own label is such a kind of, it gives us a chance to, if it didn't get it right, like on the first release, to have another go at it.
Absolutely,
or to kind of keep pushing. And actually, I brought on a friend, Sean, who I worked with him for years, like making trance with him, right? And anyway, he's really kind of his path in music is that he's now doing a lot of social media stuff. So I brought him in to do label management for Ionica, like to do the kind of run the day-to-day stuff, and then I can give him like lists of things to do. You know,
delegation.
Well, like, right, okay, so you're going to spend a week doing this and getting in touch with these people and like expanding a promo list and looking for playlists and, you know, things like that. That I like as a way of just kind of trying to keep the momentum going with those tracks. And like, one like
no, please.
Like a huge part of releasing a track is visibility. So if we leave a gap between releasing music, like at least a month, and put one track out at a time, or maybe two, like two slightly different, like two versions of the track, and then push it on promo and like a few different promo services, push it on playlists, you know, all to try to get it more visible. Because if you get, like say, up the Beatport chart, then you start getting into playlists.
Once again,
on
visibility,
Spotify.
people. The more audience you've got, the more other people want it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really all about that, and it feels like giving the tracks the chance to have that visibility is like massively important.
Whereas I suppose you've got a bit of a double-edged sword with Ionica, right? Because obviously you're, as you say, you know, an independent label. Not only are you trying to promote the actual tracks themselves, but you're trying to promote your own label, right? So for future tracks, you've got a bigger audience. And does that affect the way that you publicise a track, or do you purely focus on that, or are you trying to do a bit of both? You know, obviously I may be short, maybe a question to ask Sean. But is that something you take into consideration at all?
Yeah, I think that there's something really kind of exciting about building something.
Of course,
right?
absolutely.
And like, I mean, you know, with doing Beats Learning, right? Like starting the label, I just thought it will give a chance to put out some tunes in between the schedule of other releases, and you know, like if stuff like that was like, oh, maybe this label's not feeling that, so we'll just put it out on our own label, that kind of thing. But from like literally day one, I was like, oh my god, I absolutely love this. It's so much fun. It's so addictive, and I'm obsessed with the sort of metrics and data and following, you know, like how actions impact like streaming or sales and things like that. So I can't remember what your original question was.
We were talking about sort of kind of you either blending or segregating marketing for the track and the label.
So the answer was like, originally it had not necessarily been about making something sort of significant, like, but something like as a kind of place to put out stuff and experiment. But I've enjoyed it so much, and it's got a kind of energy of its own now that I've brought Sean in, and I'm putting money behind like the marketing.
Amazing.
To push the label profile, because that the label is tied in with Trilucid as an act. And it obviously, like, the better the music does, the better the label does, and the better the label does, the better the music does.
Of course.
So they all feed in. But yeah, it's about like building a brand that is kind of, I guess, legit.
Yeah, of course.
And that's really difficult to do.
Again, it's about your personal brand as well, right? Exactly as you say, you know, having the blend between Trilucid and Ionica, you know, it's about how do they succinctly work together? You know, what is the core or the sort of kind of mutual branding and personality of them, so to speak? And that must be quite difficult to actually go, even just sitting down and going, right, okay, who do we want to be? Who do we want to stand for? You know, how do we want people to see us? And even then, right, it's all down to interpretation, what type of market, you know, who sees it and how they perceive it. And you know, if I was to sort of kind of, I don't want to put you on the spot, but who is Ionica to you? You know, if you was to look at them, if you was to describe how you see them.
Yeah, like the kind of the image or the brand that we're trying to create, I suppose. I'm 43, right?
Yeah.
So I
don't mean to laugh at that, by the way. I'm very, very close behind you.
So, but like, I'm 43, and I guess I'm a grown up, and so a lot of the kind of image and branding and you know the social media stuff, like that kind of thing, is about trying to speak in like my voice or our voice. Of course. We got a little while ago, got a guy to help us out with social media, and there was so many fire emojis, and I'm like, I've never ever sent a fire emoji to anybody, and they were like, everything was just like so hyped and hyperactive, and I was like, okay, that brand would work definitely for a younger artist. And it doesn't feel like my personality. It doesn't feel like Hilton's personality. Like we're I guess we're just a bit older, and that's not how we talk or how we communicate. So I think, but a lot of it is basically trying to come across as authentically as we possibly can, and just talk. You know, like when we're doing social media posts and like putting things up, it's really about just kind of talking about like what we did and how we did it, and you know, trying to like connect those stories to the music, I guess. So that's really the focus of it. There's not like a kind of we're not trying to be like cool. We're not trying. I mean, you know,
43-year-old trying to be cool anyway.
I know it'd be a sad state of affairs, isn't it? But yeah, it's just about kind of telling stories that connect with people. And you know, and honestly, I'm like, you'll know a bit about it, but like both me and Hilton have had such a hard time for the last decade, like all sorts of like illness and, you know, family stuff and you know, like just crazy. And so a lot of the music we make is really connected to those experiences. Or like making the music is like a cathartic response to those kind of traumas.
The emotional involvement in a track as well, right, is in some cases what grabs the people in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a few tracks, you know, like, I mean, some of the tracks, like One Day at a Time, obviously the track title in and of itself is quite a sort of emotive, and people connected just with the track title. And then, you know, The Love I Never Lost, that was like, I wrote that for my aunt. And
does she know that?
No, she died.
Shit. Have I cut that one out? Sorry, mate.
Don't cut it out. But anyway, brilliant. No. So I wrote that for her as like a memory. Yeah. And like, again, because of the title, people kind of connected with it, and I've got loads of messages on Facebook and Instagram just like saying, like this song helped me get through a tough time. So I guess the fact that the songs were written because we were having a tough time when we wrote them, that must come through in the music and help.
Absolutely. And how rewarding, you know, when you, as you say, when you put so much of yourself, and obviously, you know, ignoring the track you were talking about earlier, where it took 7 years to build, something like this where actually it's not just a labour of love, it's a labour of your soul, right? It is like your feelings, your true emotions coming in and out into Cubase, into Ableton, whatever people are using, and obviously they're for everyone to listen to. But then to find out that people, or it made other people feel the same. You know, that must feel, I'll ask you, how does that feel?
Yeah, it is incredibly rewarding. I think something really interesting about electronic music is, more often than not, it's instrumental.
Yeah.
And it seems like people can because the kind of feeling or the emotional like profile of the track is kind of, again, a little bit subjective, a bit open to interpretation. Because there's no lyrics literally telling you, you know, how the singer's feeling, and you know, because it leaves that space for listeners to kind of interpret it and feel it in their way. And I guess we do kind of make like emotional music. You know, like a lot, particularly like a lot of the tracks that came out the last few years, we wrote in lockdown, and it was not about the dance floor tracks. It was not about making stuff for raving. It was about making stuff that we just wanted to listen to at the time. And then, you know, we wrote quite a lot of music, and then that all came out over the space of the last few years. But it was, for various reasons, a very kind of emotionally intense time. Actually, I mean, you know, it was a pandemic. It was intense.
Yeah, it was intense. Right? I was going to say.
And a lot of that kind of feeling went into the music. So yeah, it's an amazing feeling. And you know, like I try and do this now as well. But like the fact that people reach out a message and say that they love it and it's connected, like it's such a nice thing, right? The internet is full of people just slagging each other off and like, you know, causing all sorts of a ruckus. And then, you know, like it's just nice to get that sort of like positivity through. So I kind of go out of my way at least once or twice a month to just message artists that I really love and just say, love this track. That is nice. Fantastic. Just because it's like, you know, I get such a buzz from it when people message me. Like I kind of want to pass that on, you know.
It's nice. I like that. That. That's really nice. Fair play to you. I'm conscious of jumping around because obviously we started with production and we went on to your label. I'm going to come back to your label in a minute because I think there's a lot more to talk about. But just this is a great transition to actually sort of understanding what your production process is. So let's take, for example, you know, you've got either a track built for COVID or an emotive track based on experience. Where would you start from? You know, I'm a person that's tried producing and I know how difficult it is firsthand. You know, for someone like yourself who's experienced and obviously gone through the journey and learnt your lessons and blah, blah, blah. But where would you start? You know, what's the first thing you do when you're trying to make a track?
So I think one of the best bits of advice I could give for anybody with tracks is, if you've like written tracks before and there's a track that you've written and you're like, I'm pretty happy with that one, then take that and get rid of the kind of core elements and use that project as a template. Like, don't start a thing from scratch. Use it as a template because you've already done good work on the mix. You've got some cool sounds. Maybe you've got a nice kick drum, those sorts of things. Just use them on the next track. Like, there's no harm in doing that.
How does that, sorry to jump in, how does that sort of kind of work with, obviously, your comment earlier about wanting to be unique and ordinary? Obviously, yes, you want to keep your own sound. But obviously, if you're taking a template of stuff you've already done, how do you then transpire that into something unique on its own?
Well, we want to have a unique or like a recognisable signature sound as an artist. But continuity from track to track is also massively important. Like if you build up an audience of people who listen to your really nice prog house track, it makes sense to make more prog house.
Fair.
Because they're like, well, we really like this prog house track. And then if you make drum and bass the next day, they're like, okay, well, I'm going to unfollow them and not listen. So like, definitely continuity from track to track, so that there's a kind of, I guess, like a bit of a common thread like throughout your release schedule. So like we've done last year prog house and then a little bit of like more melodic stuff and then a bit of like ambient chill breaks sort of stuff, like electronica, I guess it was called. But those tracks were all connected to each other in some way, so that from the first release on the label through to the like release number 11, there's like a little bit of each track prior sort of referenced in it in a way, and it's just to kind of, I don't know, like tell a story and keep continuity.
Yeah.
So yeah, like ultimately as an artist, you're trying to build, like create a sound and create, your kind of signature.
Yeah.
So if you hit on something that you're really feeling, use that as the building blocks for the next track. You know, one of the things I will do is like if I find a good kick, I'll keep the kick, but then maybe I'll just get a vinyl kick and just use the mids of that to give that because like the previous kick is like it's really solid in the low end, but you want to give it a slightly different character. So you give the character in the mid range, but you keep the quality of the low end because you know it works, right? And yeah, same with things like bass lines or lead sounds, you know, those kinds of things. Is you can keep the presets and maybe just tweak them a little bit so that they've got a sort of common thread with the previous track, but still sound fresh.
Yeah.
But that, in and of itself, just taking a previous project and using that template, it saves you the first 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, or however long you spent figuring stuff out and putting in your sidechain channel and all that. And it's just like, oh, that's all done. So like you can just get creating straight away. Cool. You know, like have a kick, have a beat, have the drums and the percussion, and then start playing bass lines in. And then, I mean, one of the things I do quite often is I'll grab a like ambient soundscape kind of thing in a certain key from Splice, and there's loads of like really nice lush like pad sounds, 30 seconds long, 40 seconds long. Stick it over a beat and then start playing bass lines underneath and start playing arpeggios, and it's amazing how quickly you can get something that comes together and you just like that's quite inspiring. So that's definitely another kind of quick way of doing things. Most of my sort of inspiration really comes from the like writing melodies. So I will just sit down and I'll just noodle with like you know, like the piano roll in Cubase, just moving notes around and thinking, oh, that might go there, that might go there. And it's a lot easier if you found a really good sound. And so if you're using a template from a previous track that's got a really good sound, like a lead sound or something, and it's quite easy to put together you know, like an interesting riff, and you're like already, because you've got the beats in and you've got the kind of atmosphere, you're feeling it and like you get into the groove. So yeah, that's definitely the sort of the main ways we produce. But like I would say 95% of the time it starts with the beats. And you get a groove going, and then next it would be bass. Fair. And then next it would be leads, and then often what we'll do is we'll just set the project like so you make 16 bars with the beat, and then you duplicate your 16 bars and you take the kick out, and then you've made a groove and a breakdown, and that's it. Like, and then you put the kick back in. You made it sound
so easy, mate.
but like genuinely, like, you know, because you can listen to that 16 bar loop over and over and over again, right? But if you duplicate it, take the kick out, then filter out the low end, and then put the kick back in, then you've got groove, breakdown, drop. And like all you've had to do is duplicate that section, and then you listen through that loop, and then you get ideas for each part, right? But what we'll do is we'll do that, and then we'll go through Splice, and we'll have the track running just in the background, and we'll just cycle through samples in the key that the track is in, and sometimes you just
the dreaded producer time to click. Next.
I mean, and sometimes it's like, you know, 400 pages in and there's nothing. You're like losing the will to live. But sometimes there is absolute magic, and you're just like, holy shit, where has that come from? And One Day at a Time, which is, you know, there's over 10 million streams now, which boggles the mind. That track, I'd written the chords and the groove and a kind of couple of nice little arpeggio atmospheres, and then I was cycling through some samples, and I found this. So the main kind of plucked arpeggio lead that comes in the breakdown, that's a sample of Splice. And it played over the top. I was like, wow, that really fucking works. And so, and then there was like a bit of kind of shifting notes around and things to get everything working perfectly. But like it was 95% like ready to go just from cycling through samples, and I'm like, and
taking the time to cycle does work, people.
It does definitely work. It's it can be rewarding. It can also be an absolute bloody nightmare.
Soul destroying.
Yeah, it really can. But that kind of technique has yielded some really good results for us. And the other thing as well is those samples were made by artists and producers who have different techniques for producing that we do, right? So there's different aesthetics to the sound. There's completely different sort of sources to the sound. A lot of stuff's made on analog kit that we don't really use.
And all of it can be manipulated anyway, you know, through various sort of kind of add-ons or bolt-ons and things like that. But sorry, anyway.
But but the using those samples gives you something that, like, if I was to make, I wouldn't ever make those sounds. So finding those samples adds something completely outside our sort of sound palette to the tracks, and actually, so it gives this extra kind of layering and character to stuff. Obviously, you know, we're looking for stuff that's consistent,
of course,
but it's about kind of adding things that, well, as Quiver said, because we've just done a remix for him, he said, more of that ear candy. So it's like, finding the ear candy, you know. So and that Splice is amazing for that. Right, so
you mentioned a couple of times, obviously coming back to something you said earlier about, you know, when labels ask you for a 4-track EP, for example, but also you mentioned about sort of creating this brand story. And when you start making a track, do you ever think about what your next track might be at the same time? Do you ever sort of kind of go, well, if I make this feels like a beginning, and then maybe my next track could be the middle? Do you ever think about anything like that, or are you solely on that track?
No, like at any one time, we probably have, I've probably got 50 or 60 tracks on the go.
Oh, wow. Christ.
But sometimes, like, it's really difficult to be disciplined about it. But I thought what I want to do is, at the end of every day, just spend half an hour writing something. Because I spend all day mastering and working on other people's music. And it's about trying to find the time to actually do my own thing. So I'm like, every night I'm going to do half an hour. Not even close. Like, a few times a month, you know. But sometimes I'll sit down and it will have been a really long day, and I'll sit down and I'll start doing something and I'll be like, I'm feeling that. Okay, cool. And I will do an hour or two and get kind of, you know, an idea built. And I feel like it's going somewhere, but just hit a wall and be like, all right, I need to go to bed. And then I can kind of revisit that idea at another time, and complete them. So the kind of like, and some, you know, there was a track we put out last year called Destination. We wrote it in summer, but actually it's like moody prog, and it just wouldn't have fitted coming out in summer. So it's like, all right, we'll save it for like November, right?
Sandbag done. No.
So that kind of you know, planning the release schedule, definitely, you know, there's some sort of, you know, there's some consideration to it.
That's actually something you don't really hear too much of or think of, right? Obviously, you create a track, yes, it's made in June, finished in June, but actually is at the right time. And I think that's actually a really good piece of advice for people to note, is now the right time to release. Obviously, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the next track on the label is a 90s remix of See Through You.
Oh, lovely.
And I just, like, I came home one day and I was like, I wonder what it was. So do you know what the M1 is? The Korg M1.
Yes,
So that synth, it's like a hardware synth from the 90s, or maybe even the end of the 80s. And the bass line for like Nightcrawlers or bass line for Robin S, like at the piano on every rave track you can think of, like that synth was the source of all of them. And I'd written the lead riff for See Through You, and I thought, I wonder what it'd be like if I translated it into an M1 piano and did a ravey version. And I did it, and I was like, yeah, this is actually proper good. So then I went on Splice and I just went like 909 groove. Like 909 is a drum machine that makes a big fat kind of 90s dance house kind of drums. Found a loop. I was like, cool, that's great. and then played in like a super hyperactive bass line, cramped the tempo up, put in some like old school breaks, and I was like, yeah, cool. But I made that in the middle of December. And I'm like, I mean, it's like, ideally, I think it's kind of like play it at a festival, play it, you know, like summer, like it's a summer track. So I've held on to it, and it's coming out sort of end of March. It's just starting to open up the sort of, like, hopefully get a bit of momentum so that it's around for the summer.
Perfect. Well, this will be released in the middle of March, mate. So they're marketing right there. Go get the 90s remix of See Through You.
Yeah. Nice one. Cheers.
No. Plug. Love it, mate. Love it. So when, obviously, looking at that then, so, you know, you're working on 50, 60 tracks at any one time. And as you say, you know, you're stealing time, really, to work on any of them or create a new one. Do you ever sort of find that, you know, what you're making for one track, suddenly you're like, actually, that would work really, really well over here, and suddenly you've got a completely new track or a finished track off of something else you was working with. How often does that sort of thing happen?
Like I would say, that's something that we do all the time. So much of like finding good stuff is finding good sounds. And I like working with sort of relatively straightforward synths, like Retrolog or Spire. I use quite a lot. Okay. Like these synths,
you're a Cubase man, aren't you?
I'm on Cubase. Yeah, same as you. Yeah. And like those synths, they're quite sort of simple on the outside, and so like I like sitting down and finding a sound and then creating something quickly with it. But then on Cubase, like you can right click and save the track preset, and it saves a whole track preset, and then you can just transfer it over into another project.
Oh wow, that's
cool.
Like,
if you make like a super fat bass line, you're like, oh well, I'll try it in this other track and see how it sounds, you know. So there is this constant cross-pollination between different tracks, and the same goes with like drums. Like maybe you find a loop that works really well to up the energy. It's like, okay, well, that track was missing some energy in the top end, so I will take this loop and use it. And like, because you've got enough other layers, it doesn't matter that you're using something from one track to the other, because the other layers kind of mask it. And again, it gives you that sort of continuity, that common thread. Good question.
No. I'm good. So look, obviously sticking with your producer side then, and obviously once again, I know you've got your own label, so there's your own tactics, and I say tactics, methods of promotion.
It's a bit tactical.
And what you're looking for.
Tactical and strategic,
Yeah, absolutely. But see, over the past 10, 20 years, right, the music industry's massively changed. We had Alex Branson, the SVP of Music Services for Beatport here last month, and he was talking about the evolution of digital distribution. You know, how has the change in the music industry and how accessible it's become, and how has that affected you as a producer trying to get your music out there? Obviously, you've already mentioned, you know, labels have their specific brand, and what one day is good for them might not be another, and etc. But how do you think, is it better for you? Is it worse for you? How has it changed?
I mean, when I first started putting tunes out, there was still vinyl. And people still bought vinyl. It was kind of, it was sort of before CDJs really took off. And there was still a lot of vinyl DJs. So you could put a record out and maybe you'd sell 300-400 copies, maybe 1,000 if it did really well. And then, so there was money to be made in that. People still bought CDs and CD compilations. And then we kind of entered the dark ages where piracy took over, downloads took over. You know, you would release a track, it would only come out digitally, and the top 10 results on Google for the track would all be like Zippy Share and stuff like that. So like you just had no chance. That was really tough for like. You know, a lot of the established artists, they'd already made really decent money, and they were touring and they had profile. So the sales of the music didn't matter because they were making money from elsewhere. And ultimately, that's what I had to do. So I ended up doing the mastering side because... like there was a few things I did. Like I was making MIDI packs for a company, which kind of paid the rent. And then I was making, I did a couple of commissions for a couple of companies where they wanted music for their like advertising and marketing stuff. But like generally, yeah, the music sales, because I was doing mostly trance, but some prog at the time. It's just dropped off a cliff. Like it was brutal. Yeah. So yeah, that was when I ended up doing starting the mastering business. Because there was a couple of tracks I had mastered myself, and then they got the mastering studio to do it, and I was like, mine's much better than that. Let me use mine. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So, and then I thought, well, this label, we're using this mastering studio, and I think they were paying like £12 a master. I was like, look, I'll do all the mastering, £10 a master, right? Because it's just like, I need some money. I don't want to get a real job. Like, I can't face that. You know, I came close a couple of times. Like, I did one shift in a pub around about like maybe 2009, and I was just like, oh no, I'd rather be at home. Like, I'd rather be drinking in the pub. Or at home making tunes. So being skint is a hell of a motivator, you know. Like, you know, just sort of makes you graft.
Every artist's best friend, right? Being skint.
Like kind of just, you know, working super hard just to keep the lights on. But yeah, so I started the mastering studio off the back of that, and made my money from the sort of positioning myself between providing a service for artists and labels, because the artists and labels are always going to be there, whereas the kind of consumer market is so much more changeable. And then the last few years with streaming, that's definitely been a much more there's much more opportunity, and it's really tough, because I think I read a statistic today that something like 100,000 tracks a week are uploaded. Yeah. Right? It's crazy. How can you stand out? Like, how do you do anything? Yeah. So, like, you know, and like we were saying before, you know, these artists making amazing music and getting 1,000 or 2,000 streams. Something like 80% of all music uploaded has less than 10 streams, you know?
It's crazy, isn't
Just crazy. So, but when you kind of start to understand how it works a bit more, i.e., you know, like visibility being so key, and you build a little bit of momentum on streaming, then the algorithm starts to kind of, you know, play nice and put your music in front of more people. I mean, it is brilliant. The algorithm is brilliant. It helps people find music similar to the music they listen to.
Yeah,
like, like that way of expanding your audience like that is brilliant. It's just the initial few steps to get to that point are really difficult. And yeah, Beatport definitely plays a big part in it, because visibility on Beatport you know, if you sell 1,000 copies of a track on Beatport, you know, they're all DJs. So they're gonna. Some of them are going to play it out at massive events. Some of them are going to play it on their podcasts, and some of them are going to, you know, just play it to their mates. But they're all going to play it because they've bought it. So that sort of initial trigger for more people to hear it comes from Beatport a lot of the time, and TrackSource is great as well. But yeah, the finding the momentum on Spotify is really important. The other streaming platforms to a much lesser degree, because they just don't have the numbers. People complain so much about, like, oh, we don't get, like, artists don't get paid much per stream. Yeah. But the one thing, like, there's a lot of problems with the business model, you know, as a general rule, but Spotify have paid out an absolute fortune, 60 billion, I think it was, right? Yeah. Like the music industry was...
They're only finally in profit. I think they published, what was it, their financials recently. Like, however long they've been open, I can't remember, like a couple of decades. And, like, they've only just become profitable.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, I suppose, like, a lot of that's to do with the expansion and investing in expansion.
I appreciate it. But still, as a business...
No, I mean, like, it's and they do pay out a massive chunk of the money they collect to artists. A lot of the royalties goes to labels because the distribution deals and things are like out of date. But yeah, so like they do pay out a lot of money, and so as an artist, trying to figure out the ways to tap into that can be massively rewarding. Yeah. So like we got 22 million streams last year on Spotify.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks. I think it was 16 million the year before. And the year before that was maybe 2 million. So
wow.
It's kind of like, you know, it's grown quickly.
That's amazing.
So that's what I mean. Like once you get that initial traction, exactly, then it's a lot easier to maintain and build on. And also, you know, like the more traction you get and the more people listen, the more potential fans you find.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
You know, it's really like and so I mean I can give you some actual figures for
please,
how much
love it. Bring the data.
So if I release a track through like a somebody else's label, Spotify pay out around about somewhere between $3,500 per million streams.
Okay.
Right. And then distributor takes their cut. Yeah. Which is, I mean, it varies. I've got a distribution deal which is 5%, but other labels you sort of somewhere around 15-20%.
Yeah.
And then the label itself will obviously take their 50%.
50, yeah.
And then so you've lost maybe 20% to the distributor, 50% to the label, and then you get the remaining 30% or whatever
crazy.
It is. And that's so from that million streams, $3,500-ish dollars, you're left with $1,000, right? Which is still not to be sniffed at. That's all right. Like if you're getting 20 million streams a year, then it's like, okay, well I'm making money from this, and that's only Spotify. And you get money from all the other streaming services, but you also get your mechanical royalties from the PRS for that. So like it does add up.
I suppose if you're a DJ as well, and obviously I appreciate for Trilucid, you've mainly got Hilton, so I don't know whether he tells you how many he's doing and shares the fees. But obviously, you know, you release the music, you get the gigs, and then suddenly that's where the big payoff comes from. Obviously, you look outside of electronic music, you're also looking at, you know, your normal gigs and events and things like that, and that's where I know a lot of the revenue comes from for these individuals.
Yeah, for sure. And with DJs, it's like you've only got the DJ and a couple of USBs, so you stick them on a plane, put them up in a hotel. Like bands who are touring, and there's 5 of them, and they've got all the kit and like, the guitars and all that stuff. The costs are massive.
Well, did you see the stadium they built in Germany for Adele?
No.
They built a purpose-built stadium, and my figure's going to be wrong here. I'll have to double-check this and fact-find later. But I think it was something like 30 million or 13 million maybe, just to build the stadium. So before they've done any marketing, before they paid Adele, before they've done anything, 13 million just to build a stadium. So clearly it's making some money somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, like, so Trilucid aren't quite as big as Adele yet. We're trying, but different market. But like, the outlay is massive. But I think that kind of touring and big gigs and big events market is kind of dominated now by a few big players.
Absolutely.
And it feels like although we're losing venues in the UK, there's still that sort of homegrown DIY approach with, you know, like sort of smaller events and smaller gigs and more opportunities for up and coming DJs to get gigs, which is great without the massive outlay.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, for sure. I mean, that is definitely. So the way Hilton and I work is that we're a duo. So, you know, like money we make from.
I was choking earlier.
But it's like I think it's an interesting point and an interesting thing. Like we have talked about it and we have established our roles really firmly within like the kind of entity of Trilucid. Like I although Hilton produces, I generally take the lead on it, but like he writes stuff and then brings it around and we use that and we integrate it into music. So like the music is us, you know.
That's good.
And like I can DJ, but Hilton's so much better at it. Like, you know that
plays
guy.
to each other's strengths, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So it makes sense that he does the DJing because he's much better at it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
I noticed you haven't said you do the producing because you're much better at it. But Hilton Caswell, shout out.
Yeah, no, I am a really good producer.
So just how, like, if you were to restart, because obviously you've gone through a lot of things there, and there's a lot of, I think, things that have changed for the better of artists, but at the same time, you know, distribution services are better. You've got a number of different opportunities. If you're not getting to the label you want, of being able to release it independently, and all these different services that have made releasing your music accessible. But obviously there's also the cons of it, right? As you say, 100,000 tracks a week or whatever it was uploaded, just you're getting lost in the noise of it. If you were to start out again now, or even maybe rephrasing it as, you know, giving advice to a brand new artist who's young, up and coming, or well, it doesn't matter how old they are, but they wanting to get into this industry, how would you start again if you were?
I think, like, being realistic right from the get-go is probably, like, I was so ambitious. I still am ambitious, but my ambitions have changed. You know, I kind of just I made music and sent it out. And I think there's, like, it's a good question, and because I'm a mastering engineer, I work with a lot of up and coming artists. We were doing, for a while, the Toolroom Academy mastering. And we were working with a lot of, like, new producers, and they'd done the Toolroom course and they were sending their tracks over to us for mastering. So there was a lot of, like, giving advice on the production and mix to get them kind of, you know, to help progress the production quality. But there was also, like, suggestions of, like, labels they could send it to, or even in some cases suggesting, like, to not send to labels yet. Because that kind of first impression is really important. I think it's also really important to put out, if you're going to put music out, that it's good. Yeah, of course. You'd like, to hope so. You would think it would go without saying, but it doesn't. It doesn't. And, like,
well, that's the issue the accessibility makes, right?
Absolutely.
You know, in that 100,000 tracks, obviously a lot of the good stuff is getting lost because there is a lot of bad stuff. But then once again, that's also subjective, as you already said, right? You know, what's crap to us might be great to someone else.
Yes
and no.
Yes and no, Like, I would say, like, musically, there are things that shouldn't work, but they really do. But there are things in production, and obviously, like, my day-to-day is trying to iron out, like, big issues in production. There are things that if you put the track out in that state, then it's not going to work, because, like, maybe the bass line's way too loud. So, like, it sounds okay on a smaller speaker because you can't hear the bass line. As soon as it gets played on a big system, it's just a mess. That I will give feedback about bass lines. Out of the 15 to 20 tracks I master a day, I will give feedback about the bass line and the kick balance probably on about 7 or 8 of them.
Oh, wow.
So, like, it's one of the biggest things, because of studio size and people not having, like, monitoring that can hear bass well, and not using meters, which is a massively important thing to do. So there is music that shouldn't have gone out, that has gone out. And I think probably one of the things that you can do is make sure you have people that you can send your tracks to and say, I need feedback on this, or I need a mix. I think, I'm going to say it because I'm a mastering engineer, but, like, get your tracks professionally mastered, because any mastering engineer worth their salt is not only going to just master the track, but they're going to talk to you, because they hear music every day, right? They're going to talk to you about, like, maybe the vocal's way too loud, you can turn that down. Maybe the arrangement's not quite working, you know, like, and give you suggestions. And, you know, there's artists I've been working with for 10 years, giving advice to, and watch the improvement. And then I'll put them in touch with labels, and they'll get signed to, like, the labels, you know. So definitely having people to ask and people to listen to stuff. When you lose perspective, which everybody does, myself included, you need to send it to somebody else who can listen to it fresh and go, yeah, actually, it's a load of shit.
I just said earlier, listening to that same 16-bar loop.
Exactly.
It's going to mess with your mind a little bit. Right?
Like you completely lose any sort of perspective over it. Like a guy sent a track over earlier on, and he's just like, yeah, the mix is all over the place. And I listened to it, I'm like, mate, it's bang on. Like, this is ready to go. I don't know what he's stressing about. But he just listened to it a million times, and then, it kind of got in his head. So definitely having somebody else to listen to, and ideally someone who's
honest.
Someone who's honest for sure. That's really definitely important. I think, I guess I kind of accidentally did things okay from the get-go, in terms, like, I made music, I sent it out to labels, they rejected it because it wasn't quite right, and I went back to the drawing board and I made more music. And that's what labels did, is they filtered out, and same with like DJs as well, like they filter out the crap, so that you don't have to listen to it. Whereas now all that crap, they're just like, oh, that label didn't like it, so I'm going to self-release. And that's why we have 100,000 tracks a week, of which I don't know how many of those are good, but I don't imagine it's a large percentage of them, but it's a tough one to say, because everybody sort of does things differently. Like one of the things, like when I was on the way over, I was going to talk to you about, is how multifaceted even our sort of niche of the industry is, and that's like electronic music, house music, dance music, like club focused stuff. And there are DJs there are artists who make some big tracks, and they become really big, and they play like Radio 1 gigs and all that sort of thing, and they don't really ever do the underground thing first. And then there are other artists who get on the festival circuit, and they never have a huge following outside of that, but on the festival circuit, they're massive, right? So their summer is spent touring, UK, Australia, everywhere, and like playing all of these festivals. And then outside of that, maybe they have like 50,000 streams amongst the listeners, like that kind of thing. And they're not like big artists, but in their like niche, they are big artists.
It's a bit like Boris Brejcha, right? Like when he come out, he was kind of obviously all these sets of producer sets. He was doing these really cool sort of obscure events, but actually, you speak to anyone outside of who goes to events, nobody knows him, which is just crazy. Absolutely. When he started out, he's a lot bigger now. And
he's blown up, and now he's playing main stage.
He got to Tomorrowland a few years ago, which was obviously a dream come true for him. But sorry. Anyway.
So the fact, like, it's really interesting how multifaceted it is, and a lot of artists start their own, particularly like younger like artists and DJs will start their own night, and they'll build like
that's exactly what I did.
And you build your little community, and then you can leverage that to sort of get other gigs elsewhere, and but it's a completely different type of career within, and progression within essentially the same thing, and like we've kind of, I guess, like we're going at it in a slightly different way, which is that we're not really ravers at the moment. If I go raving, I need to take a week off afterwards to get back to normal.
That sounds about right, mate.
But I do. So we're writing a lot of music and going out when we're playing gigs and stuff.
Fair.
But so our way of building our profile is through making music and pushing the music out. But that's not necessarily the main focus for different artists. So I suppose ultimately, my point is, and to kind of in a very roundabout way answer that question, is to pick what you want to do as an artist. Like, do you want to DJ and the tunes support it? Do you want to make tunes and the live stuff support it? Do you want to run a night? Like, do you want to run a label?
What's your goal?
What's your goal? What's the kind of main focus of what you want to do? And every career in music, unless it's somebody really lucky, but actually even then, is not just like, you're not just a DJ, you're not just an artist, but you've got to do like the management stuff and negotiations and contracts and all sorts of things, and like you have to like know and learn everything. And I mean, again, that goes way back to the original thing you said about like how I've got a few different sort of things that I do in the business. But all of those create the career. But like, it's about finding which one you want to make your main focus, and that will change through the years as well.
I suppose a sort of follow-on question to that as well, something I spoke to Paddy Fletcher, our first guest, about, was how you sort of he was finding his voice. And obviously with exactly what we just spoke about, right, let's be honest, electronic music is so blending together, the genres at the minute, 1 minute you're trance, next minute you're techno. I know I was exactly like that. Even sort of, I like to sort of bring it up myself, but obviously with Trilucid, I look at you, Andy, and you've obviously had a couple of other aliases previously as well, and sort of finding your feet, finding your voice through different genres you're testing out, what works, what takes off, what doesn't, even that, how did that sort of kind of change what you did when you maybe started up Trilucid? Were there like lessons you learned from previous aliases that you took in, or was it a case of, right, well, you tried that with drum and bass, for example, didn't like that, didn't like making it, it was shit, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm going to do trance because I do love trance, and that's actually worked for you. What lessons have you learned from that?
I think, well, from Trilucid, I'd been releasing loads of music as Andy Tao.
And then of course.
I put a tune out, and I was like, it's a bit more proggy, so it doesn't count as trance. So I'll put it out under a different alias. That was Departures. Yep. It was like my biggest track by mile, and a completely unknown alias.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, so what I should have done is release it as Andy Tao and used all of that to build on the profile that I already had.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, the last few years has been about focusing my attention on one project.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a kind of bigger version of that visibility thing. It's like, okay, we can split the focus and be like, well, I'm making house stuff, so that's an alias, and I'm making techno stuff, so that's an alias. And then it's okay as an artist to release stuff that doesn't exactly fit on the rails of what you're doing. Like, and sometimes those tracks work really well, and they complement the other tracks you're releasing. So that was definitely a big lesson to learn. There's always, I mean, it's the magic of being like an artist working under an alias. Yeah, is if something goes not right, then you're just like, well, forget that one. Start a new one, clean slate. You know? And it's like there's something. Although you're starting from the beginning, you're never fully starting from the beginning, of course, because you've learned so much.
Absolutely.
Before. And that's really kind of like quite a valuable thing. Like, there are other projects that I will do, but they are on hold until the Trilucid momentum is like I'm aiming for an inflection point where Hilton is essentially touring. Nice. 100 gigs a year, 150 gigs a year. That's the aim.
It's self-sustaining then in many ways, right? You keep doing your stuff, but you're not having to push.
Yeah, and I think the necessity to do mastering and mixing to make money will be less. There'll be less impetus to do that because Hilton will be touring, and that will pay a bit to me. Yep. The music will be doing well, and that will pay a bit to me. Yep. And then I can reduce the amount of mastering I'm doing, and then start writing more music. Nice. And then it's a kind of like self-sustaining, sort of virtuous circle, right? And that at that point, I'll definitely want to do like. We've got about 15 absolutely belter techno tracks, and they're like, it's like progressive techno, so it's quite heavy, but it's melodic. Okay. And I'm just like, and no other tracks come out like that. And so it's not like we've made something and it's going out of date because it was never in date in the first place. Like, nobody made anything like it. So like there's either no market for it whatsoever, or we're going to create our own thing.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
But these are sort of like longer term projects, and it's about that singular focus on the main thing, because that will hopefully lead to, you know, more solid income.
Yeah.
And then if you because I've made money from the mastering stuff, it's meant I've got money to pay Sean to do the label management stuff.
Of course.
And that takes work off my shoulders so that I can focus more on writing.
Absolutely.
Like my ideal year would just be write music every day.
Fair.
But the reality is that you have to do so many other things, and it's very, very rare. Really, like there are so few artists who get to just do that.
Yeah.
Like they have to do all sorts of other things too, or take jobs they don't want to. Like, but yeah, you got to be sort of realistic about it.
Of course, fair.
And definitely, I was definitely sort of idealistic and not realistic for a long time. And then and also like one other thing that's, like I mentioned before, is that at any one time the thing that you're focused on might change into something else because of what, like, if the first few tracks of the new batch with Trilucid hadn't taken off in that way, I wouldn't be, you know, focused so much on Trilucid. But that, seeing that momentum build opened that door, and and it kind of made you think, like, oh, actually, this could be something worth pursuing, and then pushing more in that direction.
Is it obviously taking it into consideration then? Is it a case of trying to have as much creative freedom as you can within the remits of what the world that you like? So as you say, techno, trance, house, blah, blah, blah. And then basically just seeing which one takes off and focusing on that. Yeah. Would you then, so for example, with Trilucid, you know, are there elements that you miss from focusing on that? So, like, obviously, you know, you mentioned obviously making the techno tracks, for example, and having to sandbag and hold on to them to be released because you're focusing. How does that affect you? Like making all these tracks and having that, but going, oh, I can't do it yet. Oh, what's going on?
Yeah. I think so. Right. Yeah. I think that I could release some now.
Of course.
But it's about trying to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And like from the Trilucid stuff, each release takes a lot of time and planning and focus and attention to get it noticed. So it's really about holding on until I've got the time and got the resources to be able to do that with the new music as well.
Fair.
Yeah.
So look, we've spoke a few times now, and obviously we've sort of kind of touched base on AMPM.audio, which is your mastering business. You know, how did that come about? And I appreciate once again you've mentioned about having these different multifaceted elements to your career to support yourself, if anything. But obviously having your educational background, was it environmental science?
Yeah.
Then suddenly being this superstar with sound engineering and mixing and mastering. You know, where did you learn? How did you educate yourself on that?
Self-taught.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it definitely, it wasn't like overnight. It was 20 years.
Not fair.
Yeah. Like I'm always trying to learn more. I'm always trying to kind of push the understanding of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in how things work. And a lot of producers are like, well, it sounds good, so that's enough. And I'm like, it sounds good, but why does it sound good?
Yeah.
I'm like, more importantly, why does it sound bad?
So
that was like a really, like the problem solving and figuring things out meant that I was always learning the technical side. But the mastering literally started because I was doing my own masters and thought, I can kind of do this better than the guys that are getting paid. So I offered to do it for a couple of labels. And then there was, I was producing music for other people.
Yeah.
So like, not like ghost producing, but ghost producing. But with a difference.
The original AI.
But ghost producing, but I had a publishing credit on the music. So like, so split the publishing 50-50, and then but it was their name and they got the royalties from the label. And from doing that, we made a track and it got signed to Toolroom, and Matt Smallwood, who you know,
good man, friend of the show,
legend.
Hopefully he'll be on soon.
Like absolutely top guy. He was like, the mastering's good on this. I was like, I've done this, and then I thought, well, I'll just pitch them. So I said, well, I can do the mastering for the label, and so I came in, had a meeting with them, and at the time they were paying a proper mastering studio in central London. I was like, well, my overheads are so much less. Like I can offer a rate that this studio would never be able to to compete with. And so they were like, yeah, cool, let's give it a go. Did a few masters. I think a few masters where they compared like the studio ones to mine. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, they're basically like, on a par, and that's good enough, isn't it? Like, and then working with Toolroom, working with Matt in particular, it just constantly introduced me to the artists who get the master, and Matt would be like, oh, if you want more mastering, then like Andy can sort you out.
I was like, because you've mastered for some incredible names, and I'm actually going to have to pick up my iPad on this because I was going through your playlist. Obviously you've got the AM/PM selected masters playlist to get the name spot on. And obviously I was going through, there was like 180 odd tracks, and I was going through, and obviously if there's anyone that's listening, hopefully there is, that likes electronic dance music, they're going to recognise it. We've got Vice, obviously Feel My Needs, absolute massive summer tune, 2019, 18, something like that, and then you've got Eli Brown, you've got Mark Knight, Salado, Dennis Cruz, Pax, Gorgon City, Danny Howard, the list literally
Calvin Harris. It's pretty
sorry, okay, I did forget the big names, but I was doing what I prefer. But mate, honestly, what an achievement.
I mean, it's like the Tiesto one. I didn't even know I'd mastered a track for Tiesto. It was I think Tiesto and Salado collab.
Correct, correct.
Like, I was doing for a while. I was doing the master. Well, and I still do a lot of it now, but doing the mastering for Solar Records. And then obviously that's Salado's label. I started doing mastering for them. Like they're phenomenal producers. And I master the lion's share of their tracks now. And it'll send stuff through, but it's just like, track title. And it doesn't say, and then it comes out and it's like Tiesto, Salado. Like, okay, cool. And it's a massive track, it's cool. I've never had to advertise, and a lot of that really is thanks to the labels I've worked with just being super sound and
Matt Smallwood.
and Matt Smallwood for sure. Like, no, he did. He really helped me out with it, and like same with Jamie at 03. They as often sort of put my name out to master for other people or produce for other people.
So that's a lot of validation and recognition, right? When you've
From
obviously,
Toolroom,
well, that's my point, right? We're the biggest dance label out there now these days, or certainly top of the board anyway.
For sure.
They've been doing absolutely phenomenal stuff, and that, as you said earlier, the Toolroom Academy, what they're doing for the aspiring artists, the up and coming producers, all this sort of stuff. It's phenomenal people to follow. Definitely sort of kind of keep an eye on them. But then, as I say, to then do something for the head honcho like Mark Knight, and obviously all the various people there. Amazing.
It's brilliant. And I pinch myself because some days I just get I a lot of the artists I work with now, I'm a fan of anyway. And
absolutely.
People like Booker Shave got in touch.
And
they were like, we really like the mastering you did for, I think it was a track on Toolroom actually. And I've now mastered their last 2-3 albums and like all the singles and quite a lot of stuff for the label. Just like, it's cool. Like I was such a fan of Booker Shade anyway, and getting to work on the music and it is a privilege really. Same with there's so many of the artists I work with, and watching these artists, I thinking like this guy's really got something, and then blowing up massively and going like, cool, I was right about that, and it's really nice. It's nice to be right, and it's nice to be sort of a part of that ride.
Of course.
Like there's a guy called Dombreski. He makes like really kind of catchy house, slightly techie, and that dude makes amazing music, right? Like his whole like building of his career is like really good with the branding and stuff like that. But I've been working with him since he was like a lot like less established, and now he's a superstar, and like he's blowing up. And there's so many artists like that, and I was just like, wow, I just love the music. So it's a pleasure to work on through the day. One of the interesting things I suppose with mastering is as we've become more established, the artists we're working with are sort of a higher and higher level, and because you would think, oh, like, so there's the advent of AI mastering, and sort of DIY mastering, and
one of the things I was going to say I've seen more recently is pink noise mastering. Have you seen that? It's like people put overlay like that soundbite pink noise, and basically what they're saying, and the concept is anyway, is you literally bring up one channel at a time to when you can just hear it across this, like, basically, and essentially it kind of gives you a rough idea of what a master could start to feel like. Obviously it's never going to be perfect, right, because obviously it's just using a formatted method, but
I think there's merit to those kinds of techniques to help with mix downs. Like, one of the things that I do when I mix a track, like, most people crank it all the way up, I crank it all the way down.
Okay.
Right? So I'm listening to a track as quietly as possible and seeing what sticks out.
Oh, wow.
And if something sticks out, I'm like, oh, okay. So, like, maybe it's just a hi-hat, and the only thing I can hear is the hi-hat. I'm like, okay, maybe that hi-hat's too loud, so I'll turn it down a couple of dB and then try it again. So I guess in a way that is similar to the pink noise thing. It's just like, like, I'm just hearing the music over the background noise, and that's essentially, you're just recreating that sort of low level listening and trying to hear stuff that sticks out. So like, if it works, then cool, but I don't think it's mastering, it's more mixing, I would guess.
Fair.
Yeah.
So how would you differentiate the two then for the naive people out there, and probably including me in this situation? what is mixing and what is mastering?
Right, so when you've produced your track, you've got your multi-track, like, either in your project or you export it, so you've got like kick, hi-hat, other hi-hat, clap, bass, etc., etc. So you can export your multi-track, and we do a lot of mixing as well. So you export the multi-track, send it over to us, and we essentially adjust the balance of all of those sounds to get it sounding really clean and polished.
And that's the mixing?
That's mixing.
Okay.
And one of the big parts of that as well is mixing down into groups. So, like, usually it's 6 or 7 groups, like kick, vocal, bass, synths, leads, etc. And then once the track is mixed, and there's so many aspects to it, like, just off the top of my head, like, if you like a kick drum, you because you have access to, like, the sound itself, like, you can EQ out bits of the kick to make it sort of gel better with the rest of the track, or compress vocals, and that's the advantage of mixing. You have this much more granular detail that you can apply to the different aspects of it to get it sounding really good. And then the mastering stage comes after the mixing. Okay. So I will render the mix down out to a pre-master and then put that through our mastering setup.
Okay.
The aim is basically to balance, get a kind of nice solid low end, like balance mid range, nice kind of clean top end, and get the loudness up to the desired spec. I personally don't like really loud tracks, but
that's like 43-year-old coming out and you mate.
Yeah, for sure. But like there was a loudness wars, right?
Yeah,
like it was getting cranked, and like everyone was getting loud. And the loudness wars are over, but loudness won because everyone wants their tracks so loud now. Because we've got like spectral limiters and like different sort of types or plugins that you can get such loud masters and they still sound really clean and almost sound dynamic. Okay. Dynamic being the kind of range of between quiet and loud, right?
Yep.
So yeah, mastering, it's mostly balance and then it's loudness. Checking things like width. So you like ideally want a kind of more narrow low end and then a more sort of wider top end, because that sounds good on headphones and it sounds good on big systems. And yeah, just getting it up to the kind of spec for broadcast. So, and one of the questions and one of the things we encountered a lot when we first were doing like streaming masters, was a lot of artists and record labels were requesting quiet masters because they would work better with the streaming services because they normalize the tracks, which is just a kind of mastering in a way.
Yeah, fair.
But we now don't do that because weirdly, although the masters were tailored for streaming and they sounded like nice and clear, they actually didn't sound as good. And it's really interesting because I think we've got used to stuff sounding loud and we've got used to that sound profile. So when we hear something really dynamic, we're like, that's a bit of shit. So now, like the masters we do for streaming and download are the same. And then they're normalized, but because we're happy with the sound for the download, we know it's going to sound good for streaming as well.
So do you look at a track, so putting on two hats for a second then, obviously having that producer hat and then the mix and master, do you look at a track in different ways? Are there different things you want from a track or different things you want to hear from a track? Is there a segregation anyway? Or is it, obviously if you're mixing and mastering your own track, I'd like to think it's going to be, I fucked up that there, But like if you're, as I say, is there a way that you just differentiate between the two or look at tracks differently?
So being a producer, I think is really key to being a good mastering engineer and being a good mix engineer. I think if you don't understand how to put a track together and don't understand how to make the mix right and make the arrangement right and the composition, all of these things are really important. So if you can't produce a track, you how can you master it to a high standard? So Tim, who is my other mastering engineer, is a really good producer. And that was the reason that I wanted to work with him, is because I could teach the mastering, but the production, learning production takes, so long to get good. And particularly learning production and understanding things like compression, those sorts of things that so many artists you don't bother with. So to answer your question, the production side and the production knowledge is absolutely integral to mastering a track properly.
Okay.
I guess our kind of USP is giving feedback to tracks, and literally it doesn't matter. A&R
alongside mixing and mastering, essentially.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And even as well, like sort of some aspects of management, like putting artists in touch with labels, things like that. But yeah, the really, really massively a big part of like our process is if we can get the artist to fix the issue in the pre-master, then we don't have to apply a more broad strokes fix in the master. So it yields better results. But we'll give feedback to anybody and everybody, and it doesn't matter if they're like a super established artist or up and comer. Like if there's something that we hear, then we'll suggest it. It's just a suggestion, but there's all sorts of things that we come back about. Mix obviously makes sense, but
of course,
composition, i.e. like layering, sometimes artists just throw so much stuff at it. And it's like, well, actually, you can just take out three of those layers and you've got an amazing hook in there.
That's always a bit of a curse for the producer, isn't it? Just doing too much.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's, it comes from listening to stuff way too many times. And just going, well, I'm bored of that now. It's like, because you've listened to it for 3 weeks.
It's had a cowbell in.
So then it's like, got to slap more layers on. But yeah, so like it's definitely like a really big aspect of like our feedback is if you take this out or pull the volume way down, then this main thing that's awesome that you've buried will come to the front and it will really give a hook to the track. And same goes with like arrangement. Like there was a track I was fed back on recently, and the vocal was all chopped in the breakdown and then chopped on the drop. But actually I was like, well, it will work better if it's the full vocal on the drop. Can you try it and see what it sounds like? And he went with it, and like it's such a cool track, and it's big, and that's one of the biggest artists I work with, So.
Do you find different artists, I assume I know the answer already, but it's good to ask it. Do you find different artists are very differently receptive to your advice? So, like, do you get someone obviously with this one was like, let's give it a whirl, let's try it, and then obviously someone like, no, fuck you.
So for sure. Like a while back, feedback we were giving, they were like, no, I don't like the idea of that. I'm not going to do it. It's like, okay, fine, that's no problem. But now, because of a lot of our clients we've been working with for 15 plus years,
fair.
and so we don't accept new clients unless it's a referral.
Okay.
So that means that they know the score, how we work, what we do, why we do it, and like that feedback is a part of it, and that the point of the feedback is to get the pre-master sounding as good as possible to make the mastering process like much more streamlined. So I guess now it doesn't happen so much because we've been working with people for a long time, or the new people we work with understand the setup. And I think we've, through sort of graft, have established a little bit of a kind of authority on what we say. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
a reputation procedure in that sense, right?
I guess the feedback comes from a huge amount of experience.
Absolutely.
And so, it's probably relevant, and most of the time it's pretty on point. Both myself and Tim. I'm kind of sounding well big-headed here. I just need to rein it in. But
just listen to me. I'll tell you what.
I am a good mastering engineer, and understanding music production helps massively with that. And same with Tim. And I think that the feedback part provides a kind of invaluable service.
Well, it's more artist services that you're providing, as you say, referrals to a label if you really like it. You're doing all this feedback, this sort of kind of guidance. There's a lot more to take than just your standing mixing and mastering. Obviously not telling you to put your prices up, but
no. I think so it would be really so easy to people send tracks over, master it in one shot without doing the feedback, send it back, kind of fix the issues in the master itself,
or not at all. Just
or not at all. Some people do,
and
and send it back to the artist, and be done and do 50 of them in a day. But I literally I cannot do it. I cannot even if it's last thing at night, and I'm really knackered, and there's something in a track, I just can't rush it. I can't not say, oh, this needs changing. This can you fix this? Can you try this? And I think I am a perfectionist.
It's also, sorry to jump in, but it's also sort of kind of your name on the line as well, right? If someone goes, oh, I've released a track, oh, this was mixed and mastered by Andy MacDougall, and you're sitting there going, that's a pile of shit.
For sure.
He's not going to do you any justice, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're completely right. And I think, ultimately that comes down to taking pride in our work, I suppose. And trying to do things to the absolute best of our ability. I think that there are other mastering studios that provide a much cheaper service. We are at the premium end, they provide a much cheaper service, and you send your track off, it gets mastered, you get it back. But
that's it.
But that's it. And that's fine. That's a different market. But having the last set of ears on a track and looking at it critically and being constructively critical about it, I think is invaluable. When I finish a track, send it to Tim, and they say give me feedback.
Double check.
What needs fixing, and the same with him. He will send his tracks through to me to listen to and feedback on, and that's it not having spend so long writing tracks. To not then do that last step is doing it a disservice, because I won't name the track, but easily one of the biggest tracks that I've mastered ever. It's gold record, it's huge. It blew the artist up beyond belief. That track, when I got sent it, there was such a clanging note in the vocal. It was pitched to
you're
a semitone
so telling me the title offline. As soon as the microphone stopped, you're telling me this. Sorry, mate, carry on.
I will do. That note was absolutely clanging. And it had been through the A&R team, and it had been to the producer and the engineer, and then it came to me, and I'm like, it's really so out of key, and it repeats 7 or 8 times in the track, and they're like, no, we don't hear it. I'm like, it's there. I promise you it's there. So I had to get them to send over the vocal separately, and I tuned it into the just raised it up half a semitone, sent it back. They dropped it in the project, and they're like, "Oh yeah."
Amazing.
It was such a clanging note, and I guess it's like same as when you're too close to a track, you just lose perspective. Everyone had just lost perspective.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't have sent the track to me to master, that wouldn't have been caught, and it probably wouldn't be a gold record, So that
only because of me.
Yeah, 100%. Basically, they don't get any credit. I was 100% responsible for its success. But finding those, those sort of things that other people might have missed is a huge part of the service, just to kind of make sure that it comes out as good as it possibly can.
Well, once again, I think that sort of shows your love for it and the passion, right? Because as you say, you're employed to do a job, well, in whatever sense that might mean, right? But actually giving that feedback, going beyond what's perhaps expected, but that makes such an impact on an artist track or what the listener hears, etc. That's a huge thing. Feel free to be modest, mate. You crack on. So look, you're sort of kind of digressing slightly, but obviously staying on the AMP and audio. Obviously, your process, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're obviously very driven by sort of kind of software in comparison to hardware. How do you think that impacts what you do and how you do it in the actual? We're not obviously coming away from the feedback side of things, but actually your role of mixing and mastering. What difference does it make in comparison to hardware? How does it affect you in a pro and a con scenario?
A good question. I think that. So, and I'm probably going to give away one of my biggest secrets here. There are different types of mastering studios, mastering engineers. Like, there are mastering studios that have big, fancy analog compressors,
million wires.
But when you send your track to them, you're sending it because they've got analog gear and you want analog character in your track. Even if you don't want analog character, you're getting it, right? And so my ethos, a really key part of the mastering service that I want to provide is, like I say, artists spend ages writing tracks and ages perfecting it, and they're sitting there tweaking the levels and trying to get it perfect. So the last thing I want to do is come in and then in the time that I'm working on it, change it so much. So it's so much about transparency and just enhancing the things that are there without adding fuzz or colour or
Would you would you turn a track away for that reason then? If say Toolroom sent you a track and it was very analog or whatever, and you'd be like, maybe I'm not the best fit for that. Is that something you do?
Yeah, I mean, so again, yes, in the past there were tracks that were sent to me and they were looking for a certain sound, and I was like, that's not what I do. And I had a guy I recommended. And probably happened 7 or 8 times. So now, though, like I say, all the new clients are referrals. Everybody knows what to expect.
I suppose when you've got that established sort of kind of network and that client base, as you say, they come to you because they know what you're going to deliver, what you do, what your sound is, etc.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so the transparency is so key in making sure that the track sounds like how the artist intended it to sound in the first place. And I think a lot of mastering and that's where the feedback does come in as well. It's I'm suggesting things for them to adjust, and then they can adjust it and try it, and if they're happy with it, they can send it back, right? Rather than me going, well, I don't think that should be like that, so I'm going to squash this bit or cut this frequency out, those kinds of things, which other mastering studios might do. And AI mastering does those sorts of things. It does kind of broad strokes, changes to tracks that might not be intended by the the producer. So like that's a huge part of it, is making sure the track sounds like what the producer intended it to sound like, because they're the one who's worked on it for so long.
Well, ultimately it's their baby, right? You're just trying to kind of help them coach towards the end.
Absolutely. And picking out points, where if there's a glaring problem, is to just point it out and say like, try and fix this. Fair.
So look, okay, I think we've kind of covered most of what you're doing, and maybe we could come back onto the label a bit. But in the grand scheme of things, what's next for Andy MacDougall? What's next for Trilucid? What's next for Ionica Audio? What's next for AMP Audio? What's next?
What's next? So like, there's quite a lot. Like, it's difficult to keep track of everything.
Absolutely, it's difficult just getting it all out to Zen.
Like for that, I loved Ionica Audio much more than I expected to and I enjoyed building it so much more than I expected. So bringing Sean in to help with it and expand it out.
That's Sean Matthews.
Sean Matthews, top bloke.
He really is.
So get him to help with that. And expand it with a kind of longer term view to sign other artists. We've got all sorts, so Hilton's been like, that guy is just so industrious. He's just be like working away in the background and just trying to get stuff going. So the next thing we've got coming up is like a new radio show. On Select.
Amazing. Great guys over there.
So doing that. And it's just like another kind of string to the bow, I suppose.
Absolutely, I suppose he gets bored now he hasn't got Giggling to look after. We all miss that place.
I mean, that place. I mean, that's what kind of brought us all together in the first place.
Absolutely,
Fantastic.
We're talking about, I was going to say, actually, for the people out there was one of my events that actually had the head Mark Knight, the head honcho tool room on. That was some exciting times.
It was brilliant. Like there was nowhere else in London that had that kind of like atmosphere and like party atmosphere,
especially on a Sunday.
And it was and like some days there'd be like hundreds of people waiting to get in on a Sunday afternoon.
But to be fair, I think what Hilton did really well then, and obviously like other than getting great people in to come and host the Sundays.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Hilton. But no, like, it was this random little bar that had these big open doors with a nice little courtyardy thing out the front on a beautiful summer's day. Then what you've got is free entry, cheap drinks, but then massive DJs. Like, what a way to really sort of kind of sell an event. And like, for someone that's run a fair few events outside of Giggling, to look at the audience and the people that brought in comparison to trying to market somewhere else, and even like I did some really cool places. I did Vodka Revs. I did what was it in Hoxton, the Underbelly or Gigi's, which I think is now called, or something like that. These are really cool venues, but at the same time, and obviously got their own audience, got their own people. But that specifically, I think what Hilton did really well there. Coming back to the brand thing, right, was he knew exactly what Giggling was about. It was this type of music for this type of people at this time on this day, week in, week out.
Absolutely.
And he nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
He did. He absolutely nailed it. But like, he's a smart guy, and the promoting and running events is like definitely sort of something he's really good at. And it's something absolutely 100% we want to get back to doing. I mean, the dream would be to own a venue like Giggling, right? Oh,
I'm sorry. Just on that note, I'm gutted. Have you seen Stormzy's new club? He's basically made a house into a club.
Oh, right,
Mate, I had the idea, genuinely, and I'm not taking anything away from Stormzy. Fair play. You beat me to it by a long stretch. But I had that idea about 10 years ago. And I had this idea of, it literally being called House. And just having all house music on these different rooms, but you've got like a kitchen room, a bedroom room, like genius. Obviously, I'll come up with the idea myself. I kind of feel
I'm
like
a genius, and so is Stormzy.
Me and Stormzy on the same level, obviously. We'll have to come on the podcast.
Why not?
Stormzy, you want to come on? Please do. But anyway, sorry, like a venue. That's an absolute dream of mine. That would be phenomenal.
It's really difficult to run a venue and to have a venue. For all sorts of reasons, costs. filling it with people, getting staff, all of this is really difficult. But like, it would be amazing to like longer term as something to do. But that like all of the things kind of depend on like something happening, so that then this next thing can happen, right? And it's sort of it's sequential. So like the Trilucid stuff, if we can get enough streams from that, then we can, and like enough profile, we can get gigs, which will help to pay for like running events and all of these sorts of things. And then maybe if things go really well, then we can buy a venue.
Absolutely.
The sort of immediate future is I definitely just want to make a bit more music. I've got another friend who's going to come on board for as a mastering engineer at AMPM, because like it's too much to handle for me at the moment. There's just I'm turning people away now because I've run out of time.
Yeah, like, fair, right. There's only so much capacity one person can have, right?
Exactly.
What, between you and Tim, shall I say?
Yeah, like, and I keep Tim really busy. And keep myself really busy. So like bringing somebody else in will be good for that. I think like I definitely just sort of write more music, do the radio show, play some gigs. Kind of keep building on the things that we've been building. AMPM, that's the other thing I'd love to do is a podcast. I've had a really good idea for a podcast. It's called Beats Learning.
Well, give it a couple of years. Come and join me. I might need other people on.
I have been wanting to do like we're a bit faceless as an act at the moment. Like we've got some very serious artist shots on our like because
do
sort of sad techno DJ thing.
Stare off into the distance. Like you're depressed.
But no, because like somebody suggested that we do those to appeal for like a certain market like for touring.
Yeah, of course.
But like we're not like that. We're like happy, fun guys, and it's just like so miserable.
Yeah.
And actually, that photo shoot, which Ben Young did the photos.
Good boy.
And we had such a good laugh that day, and like really fun, like. But all the photos is I was like looking so unhappy. I was serious and like we're gonna beat you up if you come down this alleyway.
Or wearing black. I was about to say wearing a black t-shirt.
No, techno uniform. But so like I think what I'd really love to do is be like this is obviously a great start. Is be a little bit more sort of forward looking with presence on like do YouTube videos and stuff like that. Either as stuff about Trilucid or doing little production videos. Maybe like I at some point would like to do a channel about mastering and things like that.
See, stuff like that would go down an absolute treat, right? Let's be honest, you've still got Tool Room Academy, you've got your Point Blank Music School, you've got all these different people sort of kind of doing these production courses and things, which is great. And that, exactly as you say, that's your gateway to really sort of kind of creating that career in sound engineer. But actually, even just you go on YouTube, how many people these days use that for educational videos? And I think that's an area that's widely underserved in many, many ways. So it's quite a cool, unique thing.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with it is that a lot of the people on there, or not a lot, but a lot. A lot of people on there are teaching techniques. So they've probably jumped the gun in terms of like their knowledge. And whether they should be teaching other people.
Fair.
Like there was
sorry, I suppose the people that actually know what they're talking about don't have time to make YouTube videos, right? Yeah. Sorry, go on, you were saying.
So like to give a very, very specific example, there is this concept of gluing the low end together, right? So basically you get your kick and your bass and then you put a compressor on it and that makes the relationship between them like sort of closer. Like.
Yeah.
But there's so many problems that come from that. Like if you put a compressor on a kick and bass and then the bass jumps up a note and changes volume, the kick gets quieter.
Yeah, of course.
And then if you glue things together, you lose a transient of the kick. So you can't, it's just a kind of mushy mess in the low end. But some relatively well-established artist who has their YouTube channel was giving this advice out. And there was a whole phase of like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 out of every 10 masters I was doing, like where they'd glue compress the low end, and I'm just like, look, I understand the concept, but it doesn't work. So I actually I actually wrote like a little kind of sort of mini article about it. Yeah. And then anybody that sent me a track, I was just like, just have a read of this to give you a bit of understanding about it, right? But actually doing a kind of succinct video about, things, why they sound like good idea, but why they might not necessarily, and what to try instead. And, just like short, like 2-3 minute long videos that are quite easy to digest.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's shit for the algorithm. You need to have longer videos for the algorithm, but I'm not fussed about that. I'm just more about sharing information.
Yeah, well, I suppose you say that. You've now got 3 minute long on YouTube Shorts. You've got Instagram. You've got TikTok, Facebook Reels. They're all sort of. Let's be honest. I think the attention span of the youth today is as good as a goldfish. So actually, it's
not just the youth today. Me too.
So that's 40-odd-year-olds.
I think it would be really nice to do those kinds of things because have a little bit more of a record of things as well.
Yeah, of course.
And I just love the sound of my own voice.
Yeah,
So.
well, I suppose that actually lends itself beautifully to my next and possibly final question. And it's a question I've asked the last couple of guests, and it's what legacy would you like to leave? If there was people heard the name Andy MacDougall or Trilucid or whatever, and they were like to think this is that, what would that be for you?
It's a good question. A few years ago, I thought, wouldn't it just be nice if I got enough streaming numbers that it was like a lifetime. So then I could say, like, in my lifetime, I've created music that people have enjoyed for the length of a lifetime.
That's cool.
And I was like that. And then, obviously, like, that's goal has been and gone. And that was achieved, and now it's like multiple lifetimes, and that's amazing. I think I guess like the legacy is a weird one. I think it's is it kind of selfish in a way?
No, I think no. It's just like, how do you want people? What do you want people to remember you?
Okay. I guess like I want to be remembered for being good at what I did, making tracks sound good, writing decent music, and kind of like, I guess, helping people out where I can. Like those are the things. Like
modest and humble. I like
that. I love helping out other artists, where I can.
Absolutely.
There's so many egos in the industry, and you like, I encountered a few of them through the years, and for them, they could have just helped me out, but they chose not to. And like, if I can, I will choose to help people out.
That's a beautiful thing.
But like, well, yeah, I guess that's just like, I mean, it is selfish in a way because I feel good when I do it.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with being selfish if it's in a good manner, right? The whole concept of give to receive, right? There's selfishness to everything that happens, and I certainly don't want to go down that Buddha rabbit hole. But another point is, it's like if you can make yourself feel good by doing something good for others rather than doing something bad,
it's
certainly the better of the two.
I'm just like fucking up people's lives. They're like, I feel amazing.
Yeah, I've mixed and mastered it.
So I guess that. Like, it's fun working in music, and it's such a exciting industry. But like doing it on your own is like okay, but working with all your friends is fucking great.
Yeah, of course.
And like,
it is.
Everyone's just along for the ride, and like my success is their success, and that shared kind of excitement, and the excitement that comes from it is like. That's really what makes it like so worthwhile.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I guess I don't think too much about legacy. I'm kind of trying to do the things that I enjoy, and that's worked out okay so far.
Yeah, love it. That's why. Well, one last question then, and then we'll wrap up. Obviously, very conscious of time. What we're knocking on? We've got 2 hours now. As good as. Wow. See, chatting to you, mate. We just get carried away.
I knew this was going to happen.
The problem is, we'll go down the pub in a minute, and we'll carry on for another 2 hours. I won't take the microphone for that one though. So, is there anything? Obviously, I know you've covered a lot of your process, what you do. Your guides to whether it's producing and obviously taking your templates and moving it onto new things, and obviously we discussed your mixing and mastering. We've looked at what you do with your label. Blah blah. Christ, there's so much. Is there anything else that you think the audience should know now? And that could be on any one of your fronts that you do, but any advice that you would give to anyone out there looking to start their own label or go into production, or is there anything you think we've missed today?
I think that, like, do it, but plan and like research and learn as much as you can. So much of everything is trial and error, right? Particularly in the music business, and particularly if you're kind of feeling things out rather than have specific guidance. So, but like you said before, there's so much information available. Yeah. And there's music conferences and YouTube videos and all sorts that give you breakdown from people in the industry about how to do things. And I think researching and learning as much as possible before you get started is worth doing, because it having to start again, it's possible, but it does take a lot of effort.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And one of the many times I have started something and fucked it up, made the wrong choice about what alias to, or if I should even have aliases, or, starting a label and expecting the music to find an audience and it not, like all sorts of things like that. Like it's about planning and having a kind of idea of how you want to proceed.
Yeah.
And like that, I for sure did not have that for a long time, and I've now got much more of a clear idea of where I'm going. But so like so many things kind of just fell into place. But so many things fell into place and then just went to shit. So like the things that I'm still doing now, I'm still doing because they did work out. But like starting labels with the wrong person, like that's such an important thing. So massive thing is work with the right people.
Yeah.
And like people say, like, don't work with your friends, but work with your friends for sure. Work with your friends, but make sure that like they've got the same ethos.
Absolutely.
Like Hilton and I have a really similar outlook on life. He's a really generous guy and really kind and revels in being part of a team in the same way that I do. So being on the same page is so important. And lots of people are in the business to make money, and that's fine, but make money at the expense of other people, which is not fine. So I started projects with people who were in it for different reasons to me. I did more of the work and they kind of took the benefit from it, and we should recognise that sooner and made better choices. And then that it put me off so much working with people. I worked completely solo for a while, like in terms of
such a shame, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Kind of like feeling taken advantage of, and then sort of trusting, Hilton, and then Tim as well, working with him in mastering, Sean with the label. So like I'm kind of like slowly expanding out, but all of these guys, like they're like family.
Yeah.
So I trust them, and that is a massive part of sort of being able to create something successful, I think. Like advice: work with the right people. Make sure that the person you're working or want to work with is in it for the right reasons. Yeah.
Lovely.
Cool.
Well, there we go. Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you, mate. I really enjoyed that.
It's been an
I don't know whether
pleasure.
I was waving my arms around too much, but I was getting all enthusiastic.
No. Well, we're still recording now, so you've just added it in now. But dude, absolute pleasure. Thank you so
cheers,
much.
Ben.
Mate.
Honestly, it's so good. Thanks for having me on.
No, pleasure. Done.
Cool.
There we go.